everyone, and welcome to another episode of Off the Hook with Matty D. Fall is in the air, not just here in Virginia, but up and down the East Coast. And at this time of year, me and my group of buddies, we start to focus in on the place we love a lot, which is the Salmon River in Pulaski, New York. And you've listened to me time and time again. I have been fishing that river since 1995, and specifically, I've been fishing the Douglaston Salmon Run since that time with my group of guys. And we have had epic days there, and we've had days where we've been fishing, and it's like, are we doing something wrong? And then all of a sudden, our luck changes. So I reached out to the head riverkeeper, otherwise known as the manager, and of course, that is Garrett Brancy of the Douglaston Salmon Run, and he's joining us today to talk about the Douglaston Salmon Run, the practices and policies, and the conservation tactics that they're doing. First of all, Garrett, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This is a great time of year. I'm sure for you, at times it might be a little stressful because you're getting everybody up to speed, all of your, river keepers and the guys who help you and ladies who help you manage the fishery. Just talk about the past couple of weeks as you've been gearing up for the season first, if we can.
Yeah, it's a busy time of year for us as we're getting, prepared to start the season. Really, Labor Day is our homecoming up here where, all of the fall guests really start to make their way back. So, the weeks of late July into early, through August find us, recruiting and training all of our seasonal staff. So it's quite an undertaking and, a challenge for a seasonal business, but we're excited about it. We just made it through training and we're excited to get out there and get in the water.
Getting in the water is what you guys do. And I like the fact that you're always patrolling, and we'll talk about that in just a bit. But what does it mean when I introduce you as the manager and head riverkeeper of the Douglaston Salmon Run, otherwise known as the DSR? What does your job really entitle for those that don't know?
Yeah, so I, oversee all the operations. Obviously the predominant part of that is the fishing, and that's the bulk of the anglers come in the fall. We have fishing year round, of course, but the majority of my planning and managing is focused on the fall.
Right.
And then we have 7 different properties for folks to rent and stay at, and the maintenance staff, housekeeping staffs, river patrol, as you mentioned. So a number of different departments that I'm overseeing, and just throughout the year, neighbor relations. We do forestry and farming as well. So got my fingers in a little bit of everything. It's great for someone that loves the outdoors.
And you spend a lot of times in the outdoors for sure. Yeah, for sure. So how long have you been the manager / head riverkeeper of the DSR, and did you work your way up in that position?
Yeah, briefly. So I've been the manager and riverkeeper for the last 14 years, or this will be my 14th salmon season. So I did river patrol a year before I took this position, got some experience there. And then prior to that, my father and I were season pass holders at DSR. I'm actually from northeastern Pennsylvania. So the river captured my heart like it captured yours and your friends. It has a tendency to do that.
It really does. I mean, to me, it's a magical place. And, and as we're talking, I'm going to bring up some pictures here. We go up there and we love the whole fishery. It's the first 2.5, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's the first 2.5 miles of truly fishable river water. I know there's kind of the marshy area, and, the egg sac floaters love that from the high banks southward, but to the Route 3 bridge. But really, in terms of moving water, I mean, this is just an awesome place.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. It's the first 2.5 miles of wadable water, that's accessible from shore. There is the estuary where you would need a boat between DSR and Lake Ontario. But
Right.
Really, it's the first place where fish, enter the flowing part of the river, and they come in big pods, and they're aggressive. They haven't seen a fly or, been presented, a bait before. So it's really a special place that way as far as angling, but just from the nature perspective, they're just in such big schools when they're migrating. I'm sure you've experienced it when you're in like the peak of a run. It's almost so breathtaking that you forget that you're fishing and just have to watch. It's really incredible if you have the chance to see like a big push of fish like that.
And I have had the opportunity to have, I don't think I've been there on, and we'll talk about this. You guys rate the days, and I think the top one is a banner day. I've had what I would call a personal banner day, and you guys have listed it as like an excellent day. And I go, if that was an excellent day, what am I missing? So, and I like, as I said, I've started fishing there in '95 for salmon, and to me, I mean, I couldn't believe, when we look at, and I'll bring up, the video again. You're looking at a river at parts that might be 50 to 100 feet across, and maybe you're looking pockets that are 2 to 3 feet deep, and they are just incredible because these fish are, 25 pounds and 30 plus inches in length, and it really is an amazing fishery. And then we started to get into steelhead, and that was just like, oh, next level stuff when you see beautiful fish like that. I mean, do you still, and browns as well, do you still get amazed when you're walking through the waters and talking to clients about the fishery itself? Are you still like, this is really awesome, this is my job?
Yeah, I mean, all the time, right? I do have to pinch myself. It's incredible, and you just need to walk the water, and it, like you just described it, every day you walk down there, you're like, man, I can't believe that this is right here in upstate New York and relatively close. And I think one of the important things you're mentioning there is the accessibility of the river, that it's not a giant, I mean, it's a nice sized waterway, but it's not a giant river. So it's, as you can see, it's very wadeable and accessible to folks, which, with these huge fish in such quantities in, a mid-sized river, it's really a special opportunity that we have here in this region.
And let's talk a little bit about, so we mentioned it's the first, 2.5 miles of fishable water. When, and we're specifically talking about salmon season, steelhead season, because I know there is a summer fishery, smallmouth, but just talking about the main, which you're in now. When does it begin? What are the different quote unquote seasons, if you will, in terms of access for the river? Because you also allow a different number of clients at different times of the river.
Yeah, so that's really one of our big, claims to fame, if you will, is we limit the number of anglers or angling pressure on the 2.5 miles. That is one of our calling cards for sure, where we want to create a very special experience for guests.
Mm-hmm.
So we do limit the number of anglers, and we try to, match the number of anglers that have access on a given day to the fishing opportunities, to the quantity of fish, and the type of angler that's fishing with us. In salmon season, we were talking ahead of starting the show, it tends to be a lot of groups of friends and buddies. So there's, and there's more fish at that time,
Mm-hmm.
September, October with the salmon run. And that's when our angler limit is the highest at 250 people for rods for the day. And then as we get later into the fall, we start to change over to steelhead season, and the angler limits drop. The number of fish returning, decreases some, but the number of people we pair that with kind of pairs with the fish. And steelhead anglers tend to want more elbow room and spread out more. The strategy there is covering more water generally in steelhead season to find the fish. So that's what we do throughout the year. We match the number of anglers with the type of fishing experience and the number of fish. So the lowest angler limit is during the winter. We have 35 people on the 2.5 miles. And then it increases a bit in the spring as the steelhead the steelhead drop back to the lake. And then in the summer, we have the smallmouth bass fishery. So,
Right.
which is a unique opportunity in and of itself. Definitely some good smallmouth fishing down your way, but it's pretty cool. There's a lot of variety here.
There is a tremendous amount of variety. When you talk about the price, some people, of course, get turned off by it, but others, like myself, I will pay a price to have more, I guess, exclusivity, if that's the right word, or less crowds, I guess is probably, and
Yeah.
I've fished the entire Salmon River from, the 13-mile stretch. I've been in everything, and I've been elbow to elbow, and I sometimes even, and you'll see us down there, or your river keepers will, I'm elbow to elbow with my 8 guys, but it's my 8 guys, right? Like if somebody puts a fish on, they all lift out. I mean, talk a little bit about, there's a couple of different passes. There's the daily access pass. There's the season pass. You can buy them online. You don't have to go to the shack every day, although I'm still old school. I go to the shack every day. Talk a little bit about that whole aspect of things.
Yeah, so you were saying you can get them online in advance, and obviously plan your trip. And if you're looking to come in salmon season, from mid-September to mid-October, we highly recommend that. The limited, nature of the amount of passes that we allow, they do sell out quickly in that time frame. So we release them in early January online, and definitely suggest to folks that are interested, kind of mark that on your calendar, mid-January. Follow our Facebook page. We make some announcements about that. It's kind of like releasing concert tickets, to be honest with you. It's can be pretty tricky to manage on the back end of the site, but it isn't for everybody, as you mentioned. And the great thing about the Salmon River is that it does have a variety of access. There's plenty of public access, but then for those like yourself and your friends that are looking for a little bit more elbow room, DSR does offer that. And I think more than just limiting the number of people down on the water, we also, as we've mentioned, briefly, we also, patrol. We have a river patrol like you'd have a ski patrol on the water to make sure that folks are treating the resource with respect and treating each other with respect. So that's a big thing to us. We care a lot about that, and the conservation, as you mentioned briefly earlier. So those are things where, yes, there is a daily fee. It's very similar to like, a round of golf or a ticket to a sports, a football game or something of that nature. But we feel, that it's the value is definitely worth the extra cost, and it is a great experience for those that give us a try. And for new folks, one of the things you mentioned is the different types of passes. Is we have the full day passes that you can buy online, or you can do a walk up and do an afternoon pass, which is a reduced rate. And for folks that have never been here before, we really try to push folks to that direction just to explore, get used to it, where you don't have to jump all the way in. You still get to fish for a half a day, which is like 7 to 8 hours in salmon season, which is a significant time, and get to see what it's about. And usually once folks do that, they the fishing and the property kind of sells itself after that, if I have to be honest.
And those half-day passes, so you usually start that at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right? And it's based on, the availability is based on how many people have departed. Is that correct? Because you're still keeping that number in check.
Yeah, so that's a big part of our operations. As I mentioned, the angler limit, that's our promise to our guests, where that's what, you're paying for, is a big part of that, is having that limited access. So we do count folks coming in and coming out all throughout the day. So when folks do leave for the day, we will open up that space, or like there are morning only fishing passes for lodge guests that might be, that's their day of departure, or guided clients. So when those folks leave, that opens the door for some folks in the afternoon to get in. And, naturally fishing starts early in the morning, and naturally, folks get tired at 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, and that opens up more space for folks that are just maybe getting off of work or just getting into town on their first day. So
and I gotta say, I mean, I've been there morning, I've been there bright sun midday, I've been there at 5 o'clock in the evening, and I'm counting down the minutes. Okay, it's a 35-minute walk from where I fish. Am I gonna get out in time, so to speak, right? But when the fish want to run, they are going to run, whether it's cloudy, sunny. I mean, and it can be like all of a sudden you see these pushes. So it's not like, oh, I've got to be there at 4:30 a.m. Of course, we still are. We're there, in the lot at 5:30. But I mean, when they go, they just go. Yeah. Give me the Dunkin' and we're ready to roll. So, But it is pretty amazing in that type of fishery where and I'm going to, and if some bass fishermen's going to call me and say that's not exactly right, Matt, but if you go bass fishing, usually you don't want to fish in the bright sunshine day because they're down low and they're hiding, unless, whereas your fishery, a run is a run and it turns on.
Yeah, I think it's important for folks to, it's a migratory fishery. So these fish, whenever nature says, whenever their internal clock says it's go time, it's time to go spawn, they're coming. And, we discussed the low water this year, which is unfortunate. We're in drought conditions right now, but there's still enough water for the fish to get up the river, and they will. We had the first fish caught today on DSR. The water's low. It's still in August. So, it is, you never know. The day could be a bright bluebird day. The water is, in the low 70s. And I've seen some of the biggest returns of fish in, between, the last 25th of August to the 10th of September are two of the biggest runs that I've ever witnessed in warm water, low water, bright sunny days. You never think fish should run then, but actually a lot of it, as I've personally learned about this fishery, I've learned how much the wind actually has to do, and how the wind will move the water around the lake and kind of force the fish's, the salmon's hand, if you will, or fin, perhaps is a better way to say it. And that's actually why, because, just like you're saying with bass fishing, you would classically think, bright sunny day, time to go get lunch, let the angle of the sun go down and get back out on the water. But there's plenty of days where you just never know. And that's part of the fun of it too. Like, you just need to hit the run one time, and the gamble is always worth it. It's once that happens, the hooks are in you. If you're an angler, you're done. It's
the worst. Incredible. The worst phrase I hate when we get up there on our week is hey, you should have been here yesterday. Yeah, well, I was driving my car to get here.
Yeah. We've all had that happen to us, and we've all been there on the day as well. So
exactly. Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things here, and again, the website for those that want to know, by the way, and want to follow this, and I hope you do. It's DouglastonSalmonRun.com. That's the main page, and in there is a daily fishing report, which you and your group, the different river keepers, put together. And you mentioned first salmon landed August 27th, and you do sometimes a morning report, an afternoon report. You get some pictures. I think this is really helpful, and what I truly love about your report is I find it to be accurate and verifiable versus boasting just to bring people to the table.
Yeah, that's one thing. We do take a lot of pride in the report, and whoever the staff is that's writing the report for the night, like, we are very, very focused on as accurate of a fishing report as possible. We would much rather give people accurate, truthful information and let them make a judgment call. Just like we were just saying, the fishing's terrible today doesn't mean that the mother lode doesn't show up tomorrow. Right. So it doesn't help us. That is definitely a big misconception out there, and we really take a lot of pride in an accurate report, and a lot of it too is we're basing those reports off of our river patrol, based off of anglers coming back to the Welcome Center, letting the guest services staff know how fishing is, and there's a variety of skill sets down there, or the fish could be in different, more concentrated in one section of the DSR than another. So it really can be very situational and dependent. And we really pride ourselves probably reporting less than what is actually going on down there. I'm not going to say we get it 100% right all the time. There's always people that take exception with our reports, but that is really a strong focal point that we all take pride in at the guest services portion, staff. So
you mentioned your staff, the river keepers, and earlier you talked about the conservation efforts and the ethical fishing. So let's talk a little bit about that. So it's not 100%, but it's primarily a fly fishing access. I mean, people do use spin rods. They throw, egg sacks, and that's also works just fine. But if somebody's coming there, let's, stick with fly for a second. What weight rod should they bring? And then what are you looking for? Because there are some regulations from New York State that you enforce and probably enforce better than other areas on the river.
Yeah, so if you're looking to come up here for salmon, we recommend a 9 weight switch fly rod specifically. A 9 weight. I recommend 10 to 12 foot fly rod. A switch rod, if I had to be really specific, if I'm going to take it even more specifically, our sister company, Douglas Outdoors, their DXF 11.5 foot switch rod is really, once they came out with that, that's the only rod I've used on the, for fly fishing for salmon. So that really is the recommendation. The length of the rod is important. This is primarily subsurface fishing, where you're using a little split shot. The river is very fast, as you've seen in some of the shots that you've shown, and you need a little bit of split shot to get down. Primarily, the types of flies you're using are egg patterns, and eggs don't float. They're rolling along the bottom of the river, so you need to be able to roll cast a little bit of split shot, and a 10 foot to a 12 foot rod really allows you to do that with ease. Also make better mends, and get ultimately a better presentation, and that really, in my opinion, is the most important thing. Any kind of fishing, but particularly trout fishing, presentation is key.
And once we have our fly line, then we have a leader material. Then in New York State, and you guys enforce this, there must be some sort of break and then a tippet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, New York State does not require the break point.
Oh,
That
okay.
is a DSR requirement.
Okay.
Used to be the state, and then they went away from it, but we at DSR kept it, and it is conservation minded, where with naturally using some split shot, you're going to get snagged up in the bottom sometimes, have to break off. We also ask that folks, if the fish is foul hooked, that they break the fish off to prevent fighting the fish to exhaustion, and prevent the fish from being harmed further. And there's just less gear in the bottom or attached to a fish. So that is really the reasoning behind that. Also prevents the weight from sliding to the hook, creating a snagging device. And that's very historical. That's, in really pretty far in the past now, but snagging was originally a big thing up here. And we've really moved. DSR really was quite involved in leading the charge with that, and focusing on ethical fishing practice.
It was a thing, I think it was back in the late 60s, early 70s, where it was taught by New York State the only way that you could catch salmon was this, and that was just horrible, because it was, and I remember when I first started on the Salmon River, which was 93, came to you guys in 95, that was the time where upstream of the Pineville Bridge you could snag, and down, and so I've seen those changes, and one of the things I really like, and I've had it happen to me, being 100% honest, I've been down on the wall and I'm fishing a run, and I was, unfortunately, I was pulling a little bit quick, coming out, and they're like, you're not trying to lift, but that mechanism of what you're doing is giving more of a whip in the water, and just a little slowdown, a nice conversation, easy. And I like that, because again, you're promoting ethical fishing. It wasn't like I was trying to do anything wrong. It's just I was being quick, because I'm like, I know there's fish here. I know there's fish here, kind of a thing. You get excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard not to when you can see these enormous fish in front of you. So, naturally, and folks, we have new anglers coming to us all the time. They don't know, or they were taught, maybe not the most ethical way originally. So, that is a big part of the staff, is educating folks on what's going on. We describe it as allowing the drift to go to its logical conclusion, and then, when you go to recast, doing so in a more gentle way and gentle might not be quite the right word, but, trying to avoid, snagging a fish. We want to allow the fish to strike.
Yeah, and they will strike, whether it's a salmon striking out of aggression or steelhead or browns eating, because that is free food for them. They're going to eat the eggs. I mean, they will do that. Let's talk about, because you guys have different regulations based on conservation than New York State with this fishery. Can you talk a little bit about that, Garrett?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're very prideful in is the fact that we are catch and release for all trout and Atlantic salmon. You know, the property came into the family that owns it in the early 1800s, and they've been here for 9 generations. And maintaining the integrity of the environment and the farm that the family's lived on is extremely important. So, taking care of the wild resources that we have is something that's essential to that family. It's a part of our vision at DSR and mission. So it's really a core value for us. So in 2006 or seven, I believe the move was made to go to catch and release on all trout and Atlantic salmon. And we do still allow the king and coho salmon to be kept, but for the trout and Atlantic salmon, those species can spawn more than once. They're also stocked in far less numbers than the other two Pacific salmon species. So preserving that also, I think it was Lee Wolf that said that fish is too valuable to be caught only once. And we definitely agree with that, especially with those species that can make multiple spawning runs into the river. And for the steelhead, they overwinter in from fall through the spring. So the more opportunities folks up and down the river, not even just in DSR, that fish is going to migrate out of DSR. The more opportunities it has to be caught, the more people can be influenced by that special connection and experience here on the Salmon River as a whole. And we view that as really important to not only the conservation of the resource, but just the local region and the local fishing-based economy.
And it is Pulaski is really, I mean, heavy tourism from, as you said, pretty much Labor Day through, let's say, Thanksgiving. It does, unless you're hardy, it gets a little rough in Pulaski after Thanksgiving. I've been there. We've done that. And I mean, especially, in prime salmon season, early steelhead, the hotels are booked ahead of time. You have lodges, and I want to talk about that in a second as well. But it does, we're going to the different restaurants. We're spending money. We're spending money at the different fly shops, whether we're going back to where we're staying and we're tying, or we burn out a reel, because that has happened. These fish are very powerful. You watched the episode with my friend Ron Binstock last year. We took him up there for the first time. He loved your place. He's coming back again, but he's like, I've never had a fish take me into and well into my backing. I said, yeah, welcome to steelhead. I mean, it's incredible. It's such a rush. So yeah, things happen.
Yeah, the first time that happens to you, you realize this is something very different. And yeah, that was a great interview on the show, and it was really cool to hear him describe, that first fish and how he was just, I've never seen the backing before, like what is this thin line? It's really, really cool. They can move a lot faster than we can, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned one thing there, the lifespan on the fish. So I think it's important that we mention this. So the king or Chinook salmon and the coho is a 4-year lifespan. They're out they get bred, whether it's natural or not. They go out in the lake and then they come in, run, spawn, and it's over. Whereas the steelhead, as you said, and even the browns, many years. So I love the fact that you're helping that conservation aspect of it.
Yeah, like I said, it's very important to us. And yeah, each of those fish have a different life history. And like I said, the trout and Atlantic salmon can spawn more than once.
Yep.
Where the Chinook salmon, and the cohos, after they're spawning, that's the end of the line for them. Also interesting, unique life history characteristic for the Chinook salmon is that they hatch in the spring and migrate right out to the lake. The other species we've been talking about have to live in the river system for a full year before they migrate out to the lake. So that's also one of the features why there's such a large contingent of wild Chinook salmon. Anywhere between 50 and 80% of the run here is wild Chinook or naturalized Chinook, non-stock. where the other species rely far more on stocking to continue.
Gotcha. You mentioned the river system itself, and while you've been there, you've been the manager, you said, for 14 years. Before that, riverkeeper and season pass holder, long time. You have seen numerous changes in the river. So this is a river, for those that don't know, is heavily affected either by excessive rainfall. It's a dam-controlled river. And then the headwaters of this river is what's known as the Tug Hill Plateau, which gets a tremendous amount of snow in winter. And snow's got to melt. And it has, I notice every time we go, there are subtle and sometimes not so subtle changes. Some of those changes have led to new and improved fishing areas, or ones that you thought were super good have filled in. How have you seen those changes, and is it a new challenge every year because of that?
Yeah, so it is a very flashy system, as you mentioned, where there's a lot of bedrock in the area. That's one of the reasons why the river's so fast, is because it can't really push down in a lot of places, so it's a very fast river. And because of that, and because of the snow that you mentioned, like this past winter, we had, over 200 inches of snow on Tug Hill, maybe closer to three. I try to block those that part of my memory out, of course, living up here. But no, actually, we embrace it, that those of us that are locals. But it is pretty incredible. But all that snow's got to melt, and it creates a lot of power.
Yeah.
And the river flow in the spring can be absolutely incredible. So yeah, the river is always changing. As an angler, I enjoy that change and finding, the challenge of spots changing throughout the year. But it does make it challenging, and also it's created some situations where the river needs help, where it is dam controlled, and there are some negative impacts from the environment, and the state and DSR have kind of stepped in and worked on that to help improve the river.
And you have done some things, and let's talk about this. And you working with the Army Corps of Engineers, and you also have to get permission, because when you change a river in New York State, that is a much bigger thing, because what you do affects downstream down the way as well. There was an area down from, I call it the main channel, down from the Meadow. I think there's a different name for it. What's it called?
The chute.
The chute, okay. And that led to what was known as the S-turns. And the S-turns had a lot of breaks through them because, land had given way. And you working with about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, maybe 15, kind of changed so that the S-turns held. That's a big project to do stuff like that.
Yeah, it sure is. We're in the process of implementing our second one right now. And it took, as you mentioned, we have to work, the Army Corps of Engineers has to approve it, New York State, first and foremost, the DEC, our Environmental Conservation Department, has to approve it. The project gets designed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It's taken this project that we're currently working on has taken 3 years to get permitted. So it's definitely not something that just happens. But I was mentioning a moment ago, and I don't want to go to take this too far off the rails, but I do think context is important. So as we mentioned, the river is dam controlled, and back in '96, you might remember this, or prior to '96, the Power Authority just ran water up and down and would literally turn the river off. When the dam got relicensed in '96, minimum base flows were implemented. The DER, Environmental Conservation Department, Trout Unlimited, others were very involved in getting those base flows so that aquatic life could complete its life cycle. So it's been very good at that. I mentioned the Chinook, all the wild Chinook salmon we have now, and it's because of those minimum base flows. But the minimum base flow is not a natural flow regime, and because you have a static amount of water or amount of flow, volume of flow over a long period of time, the river loses its energy to scour and move bedrock, sediment throughout it. So you wind up getting all the deep holding pools become depositional areas for the river,
Right.
and it forces the river to get shallower and wider. So that's what we've been seeing for the last, 20 years. DEC's been doing stream restorations for, roughly 20 years or so.
Hmm.
And then in 2017, DSR did its first project, and we're doing our second one this year. So that's really the kind of the history behind that, and I just find that stuff interesting and good context for those that enjoy this fishery and wonder why that stuff's happening.
And this new project that you're doing is in a really popular hole. So
Yes, sir.
what is the goal? Is it to improve that stream, in that section of the stream?
Yeah, so we're improving banks on two different pools, the Upper Clay Pool and the Meadow Run, and both of these pools have a high bank where it's mostly topsoil,
Mhm.
being easily eroded by the river. Trees are falling in the river, and
Mhm.
the river's getting wider and shallower, as I mentioned. So we're going to be installing they're called towwood structures. Basically, you take a tree and stick the root ball into the current of the river, bury it into the bank of the river, and that the roots of the tree protect the bank from the current of the river. So it forces the river to scour down instead of at the bank. And
Gotcha.
so that's what we're looking to do in both of these sections. So over the course, it'll take probably about 3 years, I would say, to really fully mature, if
Right.
you will. So I'm really excited about that. These two areas that we're improving have been two of the classic pools on DSR for many years, and they've gotten shallower and wider and don't hold as many fish as they would, used to. So
Yep.
this is really going to improve that. We did the work in 2017 to the S curve area, like you mentioned, and that
Yep.
really helped improve the holding water in that area. And I expect the same for this new section.
So I have a question, and because I'm always, I want to know, right? Like, because you see the changes. So when you improve the S curves, did that
Yeah.
also help to? I know the lower clay changed down from that, but then the bobber hole became better, deeper, etc. So did the water then just become redirected, or was that more of the flooding and the winter, or a combination of both?
Well, ultimately, it's a combination of everything,
Okay.
but it is still maturing, if you will.
Okay.
That 2017 project where, the lower clay, which is downstream, just downstream of where we did these stream improvements, at that time, you would remember that the lower clay was, or at least the run leading into lower clay was like mid shin deep,
Yep.
if that. And now it's over our heads. You couldn't even stand there if you wanted, and so that's how the projects do improve. So not only do you improve right where the towage structures are, but it'll improve in some cases upstream, and then obviously, or not, maybe not obvious, but downstream of those areas it will also improve. So yes, the lower clay did change, but there is a much larger holding pool there now. And as you're mentioning, the bobber hole has continued to improve and is even continued to improve this year. I was just down there training the River Patrol staff and was really pleased with how that's continuing to grow
Right.
and improve as a location, and that's all a result of that stream restoration project that we did.
And I want to kind of roll back. There's two other changes that you've made, one this year and one a while back. In terms of fishing in the
Mhm.
Meadow Run, which leads out of the main clay, let's say, to the chute, you have brought in, because there's a lot of anglers who either will use spey rods, so you're letting out a lot of line, or they're using, I lost the name, where the wheel spins
Center
backward.
pin?
Yeah, pinning. Yeah. And you've done a whole rotation system to
Yep.
allow for a better angler experience. What brought that on? Was it the clients, something you all noticed?
Yeah, so, one of the things that we always are taking feedback from our guests, and that is very important to us. It really guides my work plan for the years ahead, the 1 to 3 years ahead. So,
Mhm.
one of the things that we were commonly getting asked is there's all these different techniques. So one of the things you asked me, what my role was earlier. Managing DSR is I always tell people it's kind of like managing a state park, a golf course, and a ski resort, kind of all mashed into one. And I lost my train of thought here. Forgive me. The managing that is all like it's like a state park.
Mhm.
Forgive me. Where were you leading me into?
We were talking about the rotation system along and where it came from.
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
You're good.
So I got sidetracked, kind of set up the rotation here. So it's like managing a state park in that there's all these different user groups, in this case, angler user groups. So we have the spey fishing technique, we've got the center pin technique, we've got traditional nymph fly fishing, and a few others. And all of those, we're all here, all those anglers are here to enjoy this resource, but they have to utilize the same resource in different ways to effectively implement their techniques. So, a couple of these techniques require a little bit more real estate, specifically the spey angling technique. And that really is the most classic way to fish for, salmonids. It really comes from Atlantic salmon fishing in Europe, where you start at the upstream end of a pool and then step cast down through that pool. And we took that and kind of tweaked it, always changing our experience, trying to develop it and improve it is important. So we wanted to say, all right, we don't want to exclude different angling techniques, but what we do want to promote is sharing of the water. With this fishery and the way it developed from the 1960s when salmon started to be stocked, is you kind of get to your spot, stake your claim, and then kind of defend your turf, if you will, for the rest of your day between you and your, whomever, not you specifically.
We do it. We
friends. Yeah, I mean, we all do. Right. And that's just the way this kind of fishery or fishing community developed.
Yep.
So we were trying to look at other fisheries and promote sharing of the water. As I mentioned, DSR limits the number of anglers to try to, allow more space on the water, but then also, treat your neighbor like yourself and treat your fellow angler with respect. And those things are important to us. Yeah. And so we implemented this angler rotation. Again, doesn't matter the technique, but to step cast through a spot so that one person doesn't just dominate the spot. I know you've seen, and plenty of others have as well, where one person could have just the perfect drift for where the fish are holding that day, and everybody else is watching that person catch fish and wishing they could enjoy it. So that's something that is important to us. That's in our meadow run for the month of November, where we've been promoting that type of fishing. Again, I mentioned before that identifying the different angler experiences from each group. Like steelhead anglers are more interested in rotating the pool, so that's why we do it in November when that's our primary angler type. Salmon fishing tends to be more of groups of friends and just kind of hanging out and enjoying togetherness and not really moving. It's harder to move when you have a lot of people. Where steelhead angling, it tends to be groups of 1s and 2s and 3s. So
yeah, it's a lot more spread out for sure. Now this year you've also made a small change, and we'll get into lodging here, because lodging, a specific lodge, allows for kind of a section that they have a little bit more access to if they want it, and then it's opened up. So let's first talk about lodging. You offer a lot of different lodges. How soon in advance should we be booking some of these lodges?
Yeah, so we have 7 different properties that we rent, and as you're seeing on the screen here, they're houses. We call them lodges, but they're renovated farmhouses. And you want to rent them a year in advance. In the peak season, a lot of our groups, reserve those year after year. We do give folks that stay with us in the current year a right of first refusal for the coming year, because salmon angling is any angling, hunting or fishing is a very traditional thing, and groups tend to do it year over year, friends or family. So we want to do right by our current guests and offer it to them. But To answer your question directly, if you're looking for this, a lot of it is a year in advance, whether that's a lodge or a fishing pass just for access to the property, even without the lodge. Really, a year in advance is what you want to be looking at.
And once your return guests have kind of booked their time because they get kind of right of first refusal, then
Yep.
it's an open lottery. It's like you're searching the calendar and you're hoping that you can get some dates there. And obviously, you see the peak season, pretty much September, October, is often tough, but then it does open up. If you wanted to do a long weekend in November, you get a lot more chances.
Yeah, and we do get openings throughout the salmon season
Okay.
as well. And just another thing to mention, they are whole houses, so it is Airbnb VRBO style,
Hmm.
just conceptually for the audience.
Yep.
You could rent the house. It could be three or five or whatever the lodge capacity is. It's yours and your groups. We don't mix groups or anything like
Right.
that. So it's like an Airbnb or VRBO style.
And it
Um,
and coming with that is
but
full
in
cleaning.
November, it does open up, and
Okay.
like I said, there are weekends throughout the salmon season that or dates throughout the salmon season that we have. So calling our guest services staff is really, if you're looking for salmon season, is probably the best thing to do. You can check the individual lodge calendars as you're seeing here on your screen,
Yep.
to look for availability, but we have a excellent guest services staff that's happy to help and makes it a little bit easier because we have on the back end, we can see all 7 lodges available at once.
Yep.
Where you might be saying, what do you have on the 20th of October? We'd be able to tell you quickly, where it'd take a little bit more time, going on the site here, which outside of that peak window is booking through the site is quite easy.
Right.
But in the peak window, I definitely recommend calling.
And as far as so this gets you, bed, accommodations. Is it cleaning staff as well, and linens, towels, the whole nine?
Yeah, so everything is included. You just need to bring food and your fishing equipment. We do have daily housekeeping staff, which we're very prideful about that as well. They really do a great job taking care of our guests. It's unlike a VRBO or Airbnb where you don't have a cleaning staff at
Yep.
any point. If you need more towels, we're there checking on the guests every day. So it is really nice. And I think you were leading me down the path there of what are the other fishing kind of perks that
Correct.
come with the lodges as
Yep.
well. And uh, so our lodge guests do get guaranteed access to purchase fishing passes. So if you're staying with us, you don't
Mhm.
have to worry about us selling out. We always we hold passes for all of our lodges.
Yep.
So you have guaranteed access for the term of your stay to be able to buy those fishing passes. And then also, if you are fishing with us, you would then get to go to the water in the peak season much earlier than other groups of our guests. So we have a tier release system, and lodge guests would go in the second tier release. So you get access to really prime water when you do stay with us.
So can we talk about that, because I think that's an important
Yeah.
thing to kind of go over there. So let's talk about and then we'll get back to one other thing too. The
Mhm.
tiered release system. So
Yeah.
is it lodge, then season pass, guides? How does it all, and then public? How does it all work?
Yeah, so as you're getting a sense of, or the audience is getting a sense of, there's a lot of folks fishing here
Yeah.
in the fall, and we do limit it. But back in, you remember Connie and Fred and other, my predecessors as managers, and they had to kind of get their arms around this. There was so many people, and there was more allowed on the run back then
Yep.
that folks, it would be, the Dixie Stampede, if we had a shotgun start. So eventually they came up with the idea of, tiered releases where, lodge guests got to go down at a time. We do have season passes in addition to day passes. So those two different pass types get released in different waves.
Hmm.
So the first tier would be our premium access guests, and that's 20. We have 20 passes of those, and anyone who purchases them paired with another form of access. So a day pass holder
Right.
pairs that with a premium pass, gets to go be one of the first 20 people down on the run and really get their pick of the water for the day. Then the lodge guests access the property, guides with clients, season pass holders, and day passes. So we have 5 releases in 15-minute increments.
Right.
And our river patrol helps to execute that release in the morning at the different access points across the property.
And then new for what are we, 2025, the Douglaston Manor guests. And is it just the Manor Lodge that has a specific area that they can then fish as well if they choose to?
Yeah, so this is a new experience that we're excited to add to, the DSR portfolio this year. We had a very special property, the family's manor house, become available to add to DSR's, portfolio as far as lodging goes. And it is a very unique and special property, and we wanted to pair that with a very special angling experience. So the guests that stay at the manor house do get access to 2 exclusive areas of DSR, for their use. So the manor house, not only do they get some really great fishing, access,
Right.
it also it's a fully catered, fully guided. You just show up, the waders, rods, everything is all set for you. So we're excited to add that to our portfolio, and really think it's an exciting thing to add for us. It is a very niche and unique thing. I mean, there's only one of these houses, so it's just the manor house that we're bringing on. So I know there's been some questions out there with folks, are you going to do this with the rest of your lodges? That's not in the plans.
Okay.
It is just a very unique property that we wanted to spare or pair with a special experience.
And so is that for the entire salmon steelhead season, or is it just for salmon season, so to speak?
Yeah, it's for the from mid-September to mid-November.
Okay.
So a little the salmon season and then into the steelhead season. Of course, the steelhead are here through early May,
Yeah.
but the fall season, really the prime of that window is when the manor guests will have access to these 2 exclusive areas.
And I think that adds for a really nice experience from what I'm hearing from you and from what I'm reading. I think it kind of gives it like, I really want to try this, but I don't want to invest in all the gear. So it's kind of like if you do a destination trip, you're going to have guides and they're going to give you what you're looking for.
100%. So this is just like I've gone deer hunting on an outfitted trip. It's the same thing where you get lodging provided, food, meals, guides, equipment, etc. So really wanted to provide a full, from start to finish experience for those that are interested in it.
Let's talk about guides here. And I think this is important to really discuss too. You guys really vet the guides that you allow on the DSR. And that's to promote what you're preaching, which is that ethical fishing. How do you all decide? And then I know a lot of the guides have been there 20, 30, 40 years maybe fishing. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so the guides at DSR are independent contractors, so they don't, they own their own businesses and they use the property for access and bring clients. So it's a very nice symbiotic relationship. And you're seeing a number of the guides. I think we have about 30 or so that are vetted, as you mentioned. So, we were talking earlier about a couple of the angling regulations that DSR does over and above New York State, the catch and release on the trout and Atlantic salmon, the break point and the leader, those types of things. We also have a higher standard for our guides, and so they do have to get vetted. And as you mentioned, some of them have been here since the the 1980s, maybe even back into the early or late 70s, excuse me. And then some are new. So we do enjoy working with the guides. We do have to limit the number just because otherwise we want to provide a multitude of experiences. If you want a guide or don't want a guide, we don't want any one group to overly dominate. So
Right.
we have 3 guides and yeah, they're really excellent on all different techniques. So this is another thing where if you're looking to join us for the first time, I would recommend calling our guest services staff, and they could point you in the right direction, ask you some questions about what type of, fishing style are you looking for,
Hmm.
and then really point you to those guides that specialize in those techniques, or, or guides that really, take to kids, guiding kids well, or, things like that. We can really help pair you with the right guide there. So.
And I think that's it, as we talked about before. You have the nymph style, the spay cast, the pinning. I mean, you even mentioned yourself, you're a big switch rod guy, which allows you to either nymph or do switch or spay. And so you do have those different, and they can be overwhelming if you don't know what you're doing. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing I'll say is, while it is an investment to, take a guided trip for the day, if you are, traveling to us and really want to ensure success, there's no better way than to sign up with a guide for the day. The other
Yep.
thing is, you don't have to go out and buy a bunch of expensive gear right away when you aren't really sure what you want or need. The guide will provide that,
Hmm.
and that really is a nice way you get comfortable using a setup or a system, that the guide exposes you to, and then you're not having to search, for, different rods, reels, et cetera, et cetera. Of
Yeah.
course, most anglers would say you can never have enough of that stuff, but at any rate, it does shorten the learning curve, is what I'm getting at.
It does, it allows you to understand, whether you understand how to fish with a float, maybe if you're using that, or an
Yep.
indicator. There's other things there, and it does, as you said, shorten the learning curve. But to me, and I've done guides, but I think also paying your dues, that 10,000 hours, so to speak, you gotta know every nook and cranny, and you've got to learn the river,
Yeah.
and and once you pay your dues, it can pay off in dividends.
Yeah, I'm a really big believer in that 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah.
If you dedicate yourself to something for that amount of time, the time just teaches you things that no one can show you,
Yep.
or I could show you now, or I see this when I'm talking to folks that are new. I'll, tell them, but I can tell I'm also talking over their head, and you just need time on the water
Yep.
to, to gain that experience and knowledge. So I'm a big believer in that. And by the way, I don't try to talk over people's heads. I've got a lot of experience, as does all of our guest services staff,
Yep.
on, identifying where someone's at in their angling journey, and being able to direct them. But my point there is, I could tell you the expert level information now, but it really is, you're not going to be able to use it without time on the
With
water.
that time on the water, for sure. Garrett, I've kept you on here for roughly about an hour, and I appreciate your time. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to talk about the 2025 salmon steelhead season? Anything, final thoughts people should know? Obviously, they need to have a New York State license, whether it's a day pass, 7-day, or full year license. They've got to buy that at one of the shops. They can't buy that at your place yet, or can they?
They cannot. So that is I'm glad you brought that up. That is an important thing to know. You do have to get a New York State fishing license in addition to a property access permit from
Right.
us. We refer to them generally as fishing passes, but it's a property access permit. So you do have to have those two things. But as far as the coming season, just, with the audience out there that maybe has never done this, if you're an angler, put this on your to-do list. There's just nothing like it. Folks see the National Geographic videos from Alaska and the fish jumping the falls and the grizzly. We've got everything here but the grizzly bears. So if you don't want to carry pepper spray and worry about, looking over your shoulder, the Salmon River is within a day's drive, and really is a special experience.
It is a very special experience, for sure. Cannot thank you enough, Garrett. Truly, it has been my pleasure to have you on. I'll see you in a couple of weeks toward the end of October as normal. And thank you so much for everything.
Thank you for having me. This has been great, and looking forward to seeing you and the rest of your crew later this fall.
Oh, we'll be there, yelling, hooting, and hollering, and having a good time as always. Stay right there. I'll catch up with you in just a second. Again, my guest today has been Garrett Brancy. He's the manager of the Douglaston Salmon Run. That's in Pulaski, New York. And again, the website is DouglastonSalmonRun.com. Everything you need to know is under their menu page there, so you can check out the fishing passes, the premium access, the different pricing structure, and of course the lodges. And if you need to, give them a call to find out more. They might have some availability that might not be listed. The number's on the bottom of their main page there, 315-298-6672. And I can truly attest, the time you put in on that river can pay off in dividends, and you can have what I would consider banner days of salmon, steelhead, cohos, and even big, beautiful browns. We'll see you again next time for another episode of Off the Hook with Matty D. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Off the Hook with Matty D.